For almost 1,000 years, Norman cathedrals and castles have dominated the British landscape. But this Norman legacy has eclipsed another culture. A golden treasure trove of their art remained buried in the countryside. The lost art of a people the Normans conquered. The art of the Anglo-Saxons. The discovery of these golden hoards would radically alter our interpretation of the Anglo-Saxons. They used materials and techniques that brought together the ideas and beliefs of Scandinavia, mainland Europe, and the Middle East. The Anglo-Saxons developed a complex artistic language which combined both their pagan past and their Christian future. They created a world of codes and messages that revealed the inner workings of the Anglo-Saxon mind, much of which has remained hidden until now. Surprisingly, much of the Anglo-Saxon art in British museums was actually discovered less than a century ago. In the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, among its array of priceless artefacts, is one of the most comprehensive collections of Anglo-Saxon gold work. When I used to come here as a student, I was mesmerised by the beauty and intricacy of these glittering artworks. The craftsmanship and the detail of each one captivated me. Over the years, many archaeologists and historians have studied virtually every aspect of these Anglo-Saxon hoards. But I'm the first art historian to try and take a fresh look at them. The early Anglo-Saxons were violent warriors who carried with them an amazing wealth of personal art. Jewellery they would wear into battle. When I look at them, it's amazing to think that these are all over 1,000 years old, and each one tells their own story. The story of the Anglo-Saxons begins at the start of the 4th century. They were not a single tribe, they were a combination of different tribes. They came from what is now the Netherlands, northern Germany, and Denmark. Their art is full of symbols and messages that refer to Norse myth and legend. Images of Odin with his horned helmet, and other animals like these serpents that slither over the artwork. But by the end of the Anglo-Saxon period, in the 11th century, they had developed one of the most complex visual languages on Earth. This astonishing Dark Age artistic movement was stopped pretty much dead in its tracks by the Normans. And their artistic goals could not have been more different. One of the first things the Normans did after defeating the Anglo-Saxons in 1066 was to build the mighty Durham Cathedral. The architecture is one of occupation. The Normans were all about building permanent public art, unlike the early Anglo-Saxons, whose warrior culture demanded smaller, portable, more personal art. When the Normans took over, they set about remaking much of Anglo-Saxon culture into their own. However, some remnants of the old Anglo-Saxon world would endure this Norman cultural onslaught. In ancient libraries like this, a few precious Anglo-Saxon stories and poems did survive. And they've enthralled me ever since I was a schoolgirl. The world of the very early Anglo-Saxons is mainly one of the spoken word. There are virtually no written records, but we catch glimpses of their vivid culture from the poetry and riddles written down by monks in later centuries. For example, the epic poem The Wanderer tells of a warrior far from the life of the hall. Huer quam me arga, huer quam maio, huer quam mathum yifa, huer quam simbla yesetu, huer sindon sele dreamas, eala beort buna, eala bernwiga, eala theodnes hrim. Although the Normans brought their own language with them, some words spoken by the Anglo-Saxons still survive today. Mother and father, Monday and Tuesday, he and she, all these words come from the Anglo-Saxons. But aside from these words and poems, there's a lack of written evidence. As a result, the popular conception for centuries was that the Dark Ages were precisely that, dark. When it comes to the very early Anglo-Saxon treasures, these only survived because they were buried in the ground long before the Normans came. And we are still finding more of this golden art today.
The biggest haul of Anglo-Saxon gold ever discovered has been found in a field in Staffordshire.
It's absolutely astonishing. I never, ever in my career thought I would be holding this kind of treasure.
The footage of the dig is extraordinary. It just didn't seem to stop.
Unbelievable.
It's the sort of thing you dream of.
This has lain underground for more than 1,300 years.
At a cost of some £3.5 million, the Staffordshire Hoard has now been bought for the nation. Hello, Dave.
Hello,
Lovely to meet you.
Welcome to Birmingham.
The archaeologist who oversaw the initial find, Dave Simmons, has been busy cataloguing some of the 3,500 pieces found in the hoard. I'm most keen to see the processional cross, which remains bent and twisted from the day it was grabbed by an Anglo-Saxon warrior.
This is actually the largest single piece in the hoard. It's about 140 grams of gold staring you in the face there.
Gosh, do you think we can have a look at it close up?
We can, yes.
Fantastic.
What we have here is probably a processional cross of some kind.
It's amazing to see it in the flesh like this.
It's a pretty remarkable piece. If you look at the reconstruction that one of our technicians did, you can see there are actually these three little holes. And that means this thing would have originally been fastened to the top of a pole or something and carried as a processional cross. Probably to make it fit in the hoard, it's been folded up. And, I mean, if I turn it over, you can see that the arms have just been folded in on itself. That's actually the bottom. And you can see the three little holes. In the 7th century, this could have been a military weapon. This is your secret weapon. This is bringing your religion into battle on your side.
So I presume you think it's war booty then?
I find it hard to understand how you acquire the bits from 90-plus swords without it being something connected with war.
Yes.
This is warrior bling. This is people wearing really dramatic, really elaborate gold decoration to their swords, to their equipment.
And everything about the way these things are cut and designed is about the effect on the battlefield, isn't it?
Well, the phrase that I particularly like is the idea of the psychopathic peacock. These are the man who will chop you in half with his sword without thinking twice about it, and because he's that kind of person, he's valued by the king. People have looked at a lot of the things in this hoard and said, surely they're made for parade, they're not for real battle. Yes, they are. You're there in that battle looking as magnificent as you can, because that tells everybody how important you are.
The Staffordshire Hoard is one of the most significant discoveries of Anglo-Saxon art ever made. It's staggering to think that this is all war booty taken from the bodies of fallen warriors after a battle that ended more than 1,200 years ago. Looking at the intricate design and beautiful craftsmanship, it's a sobering thought that in order to see this detail clearly, you'd have to get very close indeed to the man wearing it. And it would probably be the last thing you ever saw, given their fearsome reputation for chopping people up. But why did these beautifully jewelled pagan warriors come to Britain in the first place? The simple answer is there were no Roman soldiers here to stop them. The Romans quite like building walls. In fact, they built one right across the entire country to stop the barbaric Picts and Scots from attacking Roman Britain. And they did a pretty good job of keeping out not just the Picts and Scots, but also barbaric invaders from Northern Europe, the ancestors of the Anglo-Saxons. By the start of the 4th century, the Roman Empire was in decline. And the provinces first to go would be the ones furthest from Rome. In 410, the Emperor Honorius wrote to the local authorities in Britain with the news they must have been dreading. Rome would no longer be able to send reinforcements to help defend them against barbarian attacks. The British monk Gildas, writing some 150 years after this event, imaginatively described it as the groan of the Britons. According to Gildas, initially 3 boatloads of Saxon warriors arrived to defend against the Picts in the north. They might have been mercenaries invited over by Vortigern, a legendary ancient British warlord. However, they soon rebelled, and as more of their fellow tribesmen arrived, they began to take over. We've no way of knowing how much of this is true. The Romano-British certainly defended themselves, but the Anglo-Saxons were here to stay. By the 5th century, the Anglo-Saxons had taken over most of the eastern half of England. This is Fingalsham in Kent, and here on the village sign you can see a little figure, Odin, the Norse god, a central character in all the early Anglo-Saxon pagan beliefs. And they've put him on the village sign not because the inhabitants are pagan, well, they might be, but because near here, an archaeological dig unearthed a golden belt buckle with a depiction of Odin. It's now known as the Fingalsham Buckle, and it's one of the most famous Anglo-Saxon artworks found in Kent. Fingalsham buckle was unearthed in 1934 on the Northbourne estate. At the time, law